Hello, welcome to Leading the Way at Leonard's. I'm your host, Dwayne Knepper. Last month, Leonard's Express was recognized as one of the best fleets to drive for in North America by the Truckload Carriers Association and Carrier's Edge for the second year in a row. Today, we'll be talking about what separates these top 20 elite fleets from the rest. Riding shotgun with me is Leonard's Express CEO, Ken Johnson. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, Dwayne. Good to be here again.
And our special guests this week are the creators of the Best Fleets to Drive For award, Jazrawy and Murrell from CarriersEdge. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, happy to be here.
So Jane, can you tell us about CarriersEdge and what inspired you to start the Best Fleets to Drive For award?
Well, CarriersEdge is an online driver training platform. And when we first started in the industry, so way back when, like around 2006, when we were first, starting to sell into the industry, when you're selling products, you're learning about the industry. And one of the things that we realized is that there was this eternal driver shortage. So everybody's talking about this driver shortage. That's really, really important. But they're really talking about ways to solve it. There wasn't any sort of method to try and attract drivers into the industry, even though everybody was anticipating that there weren't going to be enough. And so I was looking at was what other companies do outside of trucking. And one of the things that they do is they all participate in Best Employer Awards. And one of the Fortune 100 best employers, that kind of thing. But trucking was never part of it. It was really interesting because I'm looking through all of these things 15 years ago. Trucking is just not completely absent. So I went into Mark's office, as I do, and said, trucking should have one of these, and ranted a little bit about it, as I do. And Mark kind of did what he does and started thinking about a way to actually start a best employer program. So maybe I should let Mark kind of talk about it from there.
Yeah, well, we kind of realized that if trucking wasn't going to participate in the existing best employer programs, that we should create one specific to the industry and then take advantage of that to focus on things that are really, really specific, really special about trucking, rather than having sort of a generic best workplace program. So that's what kind of got us started with it. And we were also seeing, Jane mentioned that we were coming into the industry and learning about it. And one of the things that we saw very early on is while people were talking about a driver shortage, they didn't really want to have very much of a conversation about the people side of the business. They can talk about equipment all day and all night, but when it comes to the people, they didn't really have sort of the language or the ideas, or they didn't really know what to do to solve that problem. So Best Fleets to Drive For was created to kind of address those issues, is to recognize the people that are doing the right things and showcase how to do the right things in a way that's easy to emulate and adapt for different companies. And through that, give people sort of a template that they can start working with to improve their own companies. So it sort of came from all of those things together.
Excellent. Jane, you received 165 nominations for the most recent Best Fleets to Drive For award. I mean, it's a rigorous application process, which must give you an incredible insight into what's trending in the industry. What's the most notable trend you observed when reviewing this year's entry forms? Okay.
So there's a couple of different things that you can look at when you're looking at trends, and there's a whole whack of information. So it's hard to kind of, it's hard to put it all in a nice little, here you go, here are the trends. The carriers think one thing, the drivers think another. I don't know if you've ever seen the ATRI list, but the drivers and carriers are in very different spaces where, what is most important. The carriers this year have been really, really focused and really stepped it up this year. I mean, there was people who had done kind of lackluster questionnaires before, like really, really did a much better job. There was more detail. People are thinking about more programs. So that was really one of the observations from that point. But for drivers, what the biggest thing that I noticed is that they are more unhappy now than they ever have been, that I've seen by looking at the surveys. When we have, and I'm not saying anything about Leonard's in particular, this is all the surveys. We got nearly, I think it was 9,500 surveys. We usually get between 75, actually 9,500 is the largest. It's usually around 7,500. So this year it's great. The more surveys that we can get, the better. But this year, the things that were kind of trending down are trending even lower. One of the biggest things that we see as a general rule in the industry is that drivers don't like their routing options. They want to have more control over where they go, when they go, that kind of thing. They don't feel like they have a lot of input into it. But that is usually the lowest thing. That was kind of in the low, but it was not the lowest thing. So the thing where people feel the most strongly, the most negative feelings about is technology and the ability to provide input, or just the way that companies, and I'm going to say, inflict technology on drivers. I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed and that they don't have enough time to get used to the different systems that they need to use. So what I have seen is that the stat where we have, which is, are you likely to recommend this company going forward? One of the biggest negative responses, which is 3%, is not likely to recommend. Now, that doesn't seem like a really big deal, but usually it's less than 1. So going from less than 1 to 3% out of nearly 10,000 drivers is a big deal. So they don't have input into new tech or vehicles, and that was negative. It was a 5.2% strongly disagree. People are feeling really powerless when it comes to new tech. But it's also with the opportunity to provide input into the business, drivers feel right out of that conversation. So those are the things that really stuck out to me as being things that are happening in the industry, and things that if people don't address it, they're just going to get worse.
And those are both things that kind of relate to each other, is that the driver's not feeling that they're being included in the decisions. And we have seen that starting to trend in that direction in the past couple of years. Certainly since the pandemic, people started really pushing into new technology, and not like technology meaning trucks. I mean, like back office type technology with ELDs and smart cameras and like mobile apps and like all of that kind of stuff that is designed to help a driver have more efficiency through their day. But there's been a lot of drivers sort of feeling disconnected as a result. And this year it really spiked up, where fleets are seeing that drivers are really sort of struggling to feel included with those.
The pay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the pay is also trending down. Even though pay has increased, fair pay. So there's a question on the driver survey about, do you feel like you're being compensated fairly for what you do? And that has increased in a strongly disagree, where you're seeing more and more people starting to get kind of fed up.
I can definitely see that. I know there's a lot of autonomous features that come to the trucks. One of the things I've always liked about Leonard's, not to sound defensive about the trends, was the input that they always seem to ask for of the items that we would like in the truck, and lo and behold, they listen. Ken, we know driver recruitment has been difficult across the entire trucking industry for years. How much does winning a prestigious award like Best Fleets to Drive For help Leonard's Express with that driver recruitment effort?
Well, I think, Dwayne, that it helps us in the sense that it's something that is recognized as a measurement. Any driver that's worked for any fleet that's participated knows the survey and the depth of it. But I think it also offers validation that we are a good fleet to work with and work for. And I think it also has helped us attract more experienced drivers. I think it's helped us attract safer drivers. Maybe in the past we've hired drivers that we thought would had a lot of potential but weren't quite there yet, and we'd coach them along, and I think now we're still getting folks that we can coach along, but we're also getting some that are looking for a better opportunity, that have a good background, have a strong background. So I think it validates some of the things we're doing. I think it also helps us learn the surveys, the feedback from the questions. It's valuable information. Some of it's validation, that we're on the right path, but it's also may point out that what we think is important, maybe isn't important or as important. So it's a tremendous tool for us. It is a process. It does take a little bit of time, each year for us to put it together, but we find it's well worth the effort. Even the years we didn't win, we took a lot out of that and learned from it. And and I tell people that we're going to celebrate today, but tomorrow we start next year's, because every year is getting tougher and tougher. So with 165 entries this year, it's probably going to be maybe even close to 200 next year. And a lot of fleets are looking to participate in this because of the benefits and and because of what it helps them become. And we've taken advantage of it, and every year is going to get harder, and we're going to have to work harder to keep going. So it's we certainly are proud of it, and we certainly use it to help in our recruiting efforts and also our retention efforts. But we're every year is going to get harder, so it's going to make us a better company every year.
Jane, can you tell us more about how winners are selected? And who are the judges? What are some of the most outstanding qualities you've seen in the winners?
Well, this might be a little weird, but the winners are not selected. They kind of select themselves. So the process there's 4 parts to the process. So there's a nomination, which is driver nominates the fleet. And then and this is what Ken, I think, is referring to, or, the work starts, is there's a questionnaire, and there's about 105-ish questions, give or take, depending on the year, that the carrier has to answer. And they have to answer it. If they don't answer it all that well, they either don't score very well, or they get grilled about it in an interview. So when we see fleets that don't answer certain questions, we'll ask, because each fleet then has to do an interview with a member of our team. And basically all we're doing with that interview is we are asking about things that either need clarification because it wasn't answered properly, or that have some interesting parts to it and we want to know more about it. And it's a really, really awesome learning opportunity for anyone who doesn't know is just coming in new to the industry. When I started doing Best Fleets, doing those interviews, it's life-changing. You learn so much about the industry that you didn't know before, like all of the ins and outs of what a company has to do and what drivers have to do. So those are the first 3: nomination, questionnaire, interview. And then as the interviews are going on, the driver survey opens. So the driver survey is the last piece of it. And the driver survey is about, 35 multiple choice type questions. And whereas the questionnaire that the carriers have to do is like short form answers. Like there's no true false. You don't get multiple choice or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And as Ken can probably tell you, it's a not fun. It's a chore. So what happens after all of the surveys are done and all the interviews the driver surveys are in, every fleet has to do a certain number they have to have a percentage of their fleet in order to get to the finals. So once you're a finalist, then you can be scored. And we go through, there's a team of us at CarriersEdge who basically get taught how to score. And we go through, when the questions that we score, we go through every single response to that question from every single fleet. And then we build a matrix based on the answers, so that when people are changing their technology or their processes in the industry, we can reflect that in the scoring. So it changes every single year. So we add up the scores from the interviews. We also look at the driver survey scores, and then we have a smaller weighting for safety and retention. And then that kind of all gets bundled together into a final score, and then the top 20 are the top 20. And that's how it's done.
Excellent.
Over 3 months,
just sort
I
of
think.
just sort of building on that. There aren't judges because we have people that will be scoring individual questions. So when people are scoring those questions, they'll be looking at all of the answers from all of the participants to one specific question. So you really drill down into the details of one particular question. And then when they're finished, they'll go on to another question. But they don't look at one complete company, score that company, and then move on to a different one. By sort of chopping it up that way, it's much more objective, and it allows us to focus on one specific area and then just evaluate that and then repeat that process. So it's pretty grueling for the scoring team, because sometimes they can spend a whole day just doing one question. And then, there's 50 others after that need to be done. So but it leaves you with a fairly objective assessment of who's actually doing what, and pairing that with the driver satisfaction scores and the overall results in safety and retention gives us a top 20 that are pretty well rounded. So there are people that are making a really strong effort for their drivers, where the drivers are very happy with those efforts, and where the company is seeing those results. They're seeing good retention, they're seeing good safety coming out of it. So those are the things that sort of lead to it. It's more like a formula than a judging process, but it goes the same way every year.
And we're trying very, very hard to make it objective. So what we will do is we will look at individual items that fleets are doing. We try really hard to tell everybody up front, please do not put marketing speak in your answers, because as you know, the more that a fleet will say, oh, our drivers are so happy, and we want to build this kind of environment, and we want to do this, but they haven't said anything about what they do. It's real. You can't score it. You can't say, oh, well, that's a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, but that's zero. So tell me what you actually do. And we try to get that information out during the interview, but it can be really tough. So you have to kind of, sift through all of the information that the fleets have given you and try to see what they're actually doing, under the surface.
Well, it's a very involved process. It's certainly not easy. Ken, Leonard's, you mentioned this before in this podcast, Leonard's did not rank in the top 20 the first time we applied. Now we've made the list 2 years in a row. What has the journey been like for you and the team that goes through this rigorous Best Fleets nomination process that Jane just explained, and Mark?
Well, it was exciting the first time we were named a company to watch. And we were excited about that. And, as we hadn't been through the process before, Jane mentioned the marketing aspect of answering the questions. You have to answer the questions, but you also have to do so in an intelligent way that, it's not a yes or no. It's not a one word. There's a lot of explanation in many cases that are involved. So, we've actually had two different teams now work on this project for us. It was originally Jim Cherry was put in place to lead this, and he retired, and now we have three others. And the one key thing that I think is important is the passion that the people that are working on this project has, for getting it across the finish line. Because there's deadlines, obviously. The detail that's required for the questions. They have to go to different parts of the company because it's literally covers every aspect of the company. So the team we put together doesn't have all the answers. They have to find the answers and then fill out the form. So we learned two things from not winning the first year. We learned what we need to do better, or at least from the feedback we received. But we also, I think, learned a little bit about the process, which certainly helped us. And keep in mind, that the top 20, many of the top 20 have been in the top 20 for several years. So it's like going into the ring and not fighting the current belt holder. You have to win to advance, and so that's not easy either. Second year we didn't win it. We didn't win it for a simple reason: we didn't get enough surveys in. I thought getting the surveys in would be relatively easy, especially after going through the questionnaire and interview process. But if you're not staying on top of it, that can get away from you very quickly, and that's what happened to us the second year. So we didn't even get scored the second year. So in this past year, we really put an emphasis on the surveys. As last year, even though we won, and we did get obviously the required number of surveys in, it was just over the limit, just at the wire. And we didn't want to be in that position again. So we put a huge emphasis. I think, Dwayne, you probably remember we did the company-wide conference call where I got on and encouraged everyone that was on that were drivers to get the survey done. Also, our non-driving staff to work with their drivers to make sure that they got it in. Which I think this year, we were over the limit in under 2 weeks, and by the end of the process, we were well above, which was good. I wasn't sure what that was going to do to our score, but I thought it was going to get us better information, because the more information we get from the surveys, just like the questions, the better it's going to make us in the end, which is really what it's all about. But yeah, you learn from your failures as much as from your successes, sometimes more. And I really look at it that way from our first couple of years in the process.
Yeah, that call has certainly built a lot of excitement and anticipation of being able to say, give drivers that opportunity to say what they wanted to say about the company. So I'm sure it really captivated a lot of attention. Mark, from your point of view, what has Leonard's done to stand out as one of the best fleets to drive for?
Well, they got in a lot of driver surveys. There's a lot of things. So the thing about being a top 20 is you can't get there just by being amazing in one place or another place. Like Ken mentioned, it covers kind of every part of the business. So you can have amazing HR programs and be really lacking on things like work-life balance or benefits or professional development and still end up not doing very well. And so the people that make the top 20 tend to have a very strong base across every part of the business. So it'll be the HR programs, it'll be the operational strategy, performance management, professional development, all of those things that really create a total workplace experience for drivers. And then the ones that stand out go above and beyond in a few different places, and usually have a couple of spots where they're doing something creative that others aren't doing. And Leonard's is a great example of that. There's a couple of things that you're doing that are really uncommon in the trucking industry. And so the first one of those that stands out for me is the way you pair your dispatchers and your drivers using personality testing. Now, that's not uncommon in other industries, but in 15 years of doing the Best Fleets program, I think you might be the only company we've come across that uses the Myers-Briggs type indicator to assess personality types and pair people up. Yeah. And pair people up to see who's going to be a really good fit. So that makes a huge difference, because everybody talks about onboarding and recruiting, and they sort of attract drivers through sign-on bonuses and things like that. But day to day, they're dealing with that fleet manager. That's the number one contact. And it needs to be somebody that they can connect with, somebody that they feel comfortable with. Now, if it's a small fleet, they only have like 2 dispatchers, it's not really much of an option. It's a whole different kind of thing. But at a certain size, when you have a variety of different people and you have options on how you can pair people, that really becomes important. And that's something that not a lot of people are doing. They will focus on pairing people up purely based on the tasks, purely based on sort of the customer or the lane or something very operationally focused. not really thinking about what's going to be a good fit on a personality side. So something else that you guys are doing that is fortunately starting to become a little bit more common, but you're still in the minority here, is including drivers in cybersecurity plans. This is something that we've been asking about for several years. As everybody knows, cybercrime is rampant in the trucking industry. Ransomware, hackers absolutely love the trucking industry because it's so profitable for them. And fleets have started to realize in the past few years that they need to get serious about it. But up until recently, like, never included drivers in that. And that was a real gap, because drivers are interacting with the company in all kinds of different ways. And drivers are personally at risk as well. So the companies that actually consider the drivers and give them the same sort of cybersecurity training do a lot better in terms of building a community, because they're breaking down those barriers of the us and them kind of mentality. So the office people get one thing and drivers get something different. You guys aren't doing that. You're sort of putting everybody together, where you may be working from the office, you may be working from the road, but you're still working for Leonard's. And so that kind of approach through cybersecurity training really helps. And there's a bunch of other things I could go on about. There's lots of other things that you do where you have very strong programs, but those are two that stood out as I'm sort of sifting through it. Like, those jump out at me as being very uncommon.
One of the things that I always look for in any company when I'm doing the interviews or when I'm scoring, that kind of thing, is how many people are being brought into a decision or being brought into a conversation. I'm not just talking about drivers or non-drivers, I'm just talking about the people. And when also that whole, where is the concern? So when I see fleets who have a concern for the driver as a person, then I see that that's much more of a stronger, I guess, entry into the program. One of the questions that I often look at is, what kind of driver committee do you have? And representation on a driver committee, that's, I think, a really, really good indicator of how likely somebody is going to be in the Best Fleets program. Is their diversity? And are you just putting, the guys who have been around the longest, or are you choosing people who might bring different perspectives? And your answer, in terms of, basically, you have everybody represented. You have women, minorities, from different terminals, blah, blah, blah. Just that we have representation from everywhere. That's a really simple statement, but it is a lot harder to actually live that statement. People will say, oh, we have lots of representation, but they can't explain how it's diverse. And Leonard's can explain their diversity, which is really, really, really helps, because it helps us understand what your company looks like and how it behaves when something goes wrong, which is really important.
That's good feedback, and thank you, because the three things you mentioned we were doing well before we got involved with the Best Fleets. So that's reassuring that we're on the right path. So obviously we've made some changes based off the feedback from being in the program, but those three things are things that we've been doing for a little while. So it's good to hear. Dwayne, as a former driver, what was most important to you when you were behind the wheel?
Well, I think, like most people that are part of an organization, drivers want to be seen, heard, valued. And at Leonard's, you're not just a butt in the seat. You feel like family. It isn't earned. It's somewhat of an unconditional culture you just walk into. We all seem to share in the challenges that the road brings. We all celebrate in our accomplishments, like Best Fleets to Drive For award 2 years in a row.
Back to back. Oh no, is it back to back? I think it is.
Yeah.
Back to back.
Drivers speak their mind because it's sought after, it's encouraged, it's welcome, it's respected. The surveys the drivers submit for Best Fleets to Drive For The award process is one of many examples of opportunities that drivers feel seen, heard, and valued. Leadership looks forward to being able to improve from that feedback. And even though I'm on the other side of the steering wheel right now as a risk manager, I'm still involved in that framework of family. I often say that at Leonard's, there are no small potatoes, there's no big potatoes. We're all cooking together from the same pot, so we're making the best mashed potatoes anyone's ever had. Ken, you want to share on any of that?
Well, and it's good to hear that, Dwayne, from both perspectives, both from your time, driving force, as well as your time, in risk control. We were raised that way. My dad was started the company, his company, KJ Transportation, as a driver. Two of us can drive and have driven, so we certainly have that respect. And, we've always been taught and, learned in this business that, freight doesn't get moved without drivers. And, if you aren't taking care of the people that are doing the number one job that, our customers hire us to do, where are you going? You're not going to be successful. And, so, we feel that it's important. My mother raised us to, treat people the way we would want to be treated, and, to listen more than we talk, and which is tough for me. Everyone knows I like to talk, but, when I get into the driver advisory boards or, the driver meetings, I like to listen, because, that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And, it gives us the opportunity to hear what's going on. Because, what was important last year, I think Jane mentioned this earlier, may not be important next year, or as important. Different things come along, and so we kind of have to stay nimble and aware, so that we can adapt as a company, both from the industry in general changing, but also as we grow. We don't want to lose what got us here in the first place. So we're really aware of that, and really work hard to maintain that culture, but also learn and adapt as times change. And if there's one consistent in this business, is that things will always change. And we've learned that over the years, and we're very comfortable with that.
Absolutely. Excellent. Mark, can you let us know, where can folks learn more about CarriersEdge and Best Fleets to Drive For Award?
Sure. Best place to go would be the website, so CarriersEdge.com or bestfleetstodrivefor.com. And there's a simpler way to get there. You can also just go to bf2df.com. If you don't want to type out the whole phrase, either of those will get you there. Or on social media, Facebook and Twitter, Best Fleets to Drive For. You can find us there.
Well, thank you, Jane and Mark, for joining us today.
Yes.
CarriersEdge is doing outstanding work, lifting up companies that provide the best work experience for drivers. And for that, we are grateful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Well, that's a wrap for this edition of Leading the Way at Leonard's. If you have questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you at leadingtheway@leonardsexpress.com. That's leading the way, all one word, at leonardsexpress.com. And please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Knepper. Until next time, keep on trucking.
We're running 18 wheels down that open highway. We drive on through the night so you can have it your way. We're the angels of the highway, bringing hope across this land. Success through service, it's all part of the plan. We'll settle for nothing less. We're Leonard's Express.